And it just doesn't add up, guys. You see people working at Tim Hortons and Wendy's and they own 3 houses. How on earth is that possible? And it's all possible because of fraud. Fraud has really become rampant. The housing market has destroyed the dreams and hopes of young people in Canada, and people don't realize how profound that is, what I just said there. You know, there is a massive impact that the housing market has on young people, especially when they just cannot buy a home, when they're looking at paying, 50% of their income towards rent. This is a cost of living crisis that the government is doing nothing to address, and I don't think any government coming forward is offering any particularly good solutions to this cost of living crisis. And I think Canada is in a terrible place to deal with a cost of living crisis like this because they have ratcheted up debt so much. And it's not just debt of households, it's debt of the government, it's debt of private businesses, it's debt of absolutely everything. And that obviously creates a major problem because you cannot address the cost of living crisis through interest rates. For example, Mexico right now has interest rates at 11.25%. That is very high. It's way above what inflation is, and people wonder why the Mexican peso is absolutely destroying the Canadian dollar. And that is why that is happening. But the thing is, Canada could never even dream of getting interest rates up to that level at this point in time because of what's happened. Now, it's interesting because you have Pierre, who is coming forward with this plan to reduce government deficits, which would actually be a good thing and could actually allow for higher interest rates, but that would have to coincide with a deleveraging event in terms of household debt, which I think is inevitable at this point. I don't think they can kick the can any longer. I think it's very difficult for them to avoid what is going to happen in Canada, which is essentially that you have this high amount of debt. The problem has to be addressed, and the problem will be addressed through people defaulting on that debt, as it always is when it comes to debt deleveraging cycles. Because all the debt that has been created, you have to remember, has been created on the premise of the greater fool is going to come along and pay it back. Humans, we all enjoy narrative. We all enjoy a good book. I don't read fiction, but I know a lot of people who get involved with fiction and love it because they love stories, they love narratives, and it's important to engage in that if you enjoy it. But the problem is, when it comes to this debt story and the greater fool theory in particular, guess what? You hear a lot of people come forward with stories and narratives. One is of population growth. By growing the population, you're somehow allowing people to buy at 10, 15 times income to buy a house. And it just doesn't add up, guys. You see these people doing it, it just doesn't add up. You see people working at Tim Hortons and Wendy's and they own 3 houses. How on earth is that possible? And it's all possible because of fraud. Fraud has really become rampant over the past 3 years. Beyond belief, it's sort of been exposed in some mainstream media coverage. I have talked about it many times on this channel, how there is rampant mortgage fraud. We've gone through multiple Reddit threads. We've dived into what is actually going on, what are the most common types of fraud. So we know that the fraud is there. We know that the fraud is happening. You have to realize that the fraud in itself is what you see towards the end cycle of a bubble. When you have these financial bubbles that have been caused, financial bubbles in housing, financial bubbles in even government debt, financial bubbles in private debt, you realize that they have to have a large amount of fraud or a component where the credit standards are dropping and dropping and dropping. And I think Canada has had both, and a lot of moral hazard has been created by government institutions too. A lot of people don't know this either. The CMHC is obviously like a government institution, even though it's kind of ran to be like a private company. It's essentially run by the banks, guys. But the CMHC creates a massive amount of moral hazard when it comes to lending. You only have to look at mortgage rates, both insured and uninsured, to realize that this is the case. Because the government is insuring the mortgage, the banks are then seen like like, oh, this mortgage that we're selling right now, it has less risk associated, so we're going to mark down the interest rate compared to the uninsured mortgage. The mortgage insurance industry is the worst industry and it needs to be scrapped. I mean, the taxpayer liability for the mortgage insurance industry is just absolutely incredible. It's absolutely insane, and we don't want that kind of liability, and we will realize that after the fact. When this all goes wrong, that is when we will realize that, hey, this was a terrible idea. It was a terrible idea backing this with taxpayer money, saying, oh, it's all in the name of affordability. It's so that people can put less money down, take less risk, which creates riskier subprime mortgages. I mean, essentially, if somebody is putting less than 20% down, that is subprime. You know, people who haven't experienced global banking in different countries, just do not understand in Canada how lax lending standards really are, how easy it is to get a mortgage. Take it, for example, what's happening here in Calgary right now. So, you know, Calgary, a lot of people are moving from other provinces, right? So to get a mortgage, they only have to tick a couple of boxes. Do they have a job? Yes. Do they have good credit? Yes. And then they'll get that mortgage. If they qualify with all the income requirements, they'll get that mortgage. Despite the fact they just moved across the country, they're at much higher risk than somebody who lives here, is established, has had consistent employment with the same company for the past 3-4 years, has great credit history. They are much better than those people, yet they will get the same interest rate and the bank will price them at the same risk level when they are massively different in terms of risk. And this is the problem that you see. And even as I showed with my moving to Calgary and moving to Alberta series, this has been a cycle that has played out before in Calgary. So the banks can't say, oh, we didn't know. I'm so sorry, we didn't know that this happened. They've even commented on it before in those articles, in the videos that I showed you, and said that they know this is a cycle of what happens. So it begs to ask the question, why on earth are they just lending then? Why do they keep lending? Why aren't they not approving these people's application? And it comes back to the fact that lending standards have gone down massively and people just haven't noticed. People just don't really notice what has really happened, because if it's a gradual decline in lending standards, then guess what? They aren't going to notice. They aren't going to see what's happening is a real big problem for them in the future. So this has created big problems now. And even Citibank and Oxford Economics and UBS and all these different banks, they look at Canada as one of the most riskiest bubbles in the world. But if you ask a Canadian how stable the banking system is, a lot of them will just say, yeah, it's absolutely great. How many banks do you bank with? Ask yourself that question, because a lot of Canadians, the herd in particular, they just bank with one bank. They have all their eggs in one basket. And I'm not saying, you know, just get your money out of the bank, go to the ATM and pull out all your cash. I'm not saying do anything like that, but you need to have diversification in this world. You need to have diversification in terms of your banking being away from Canada in a different country, so you can save there. Like, for example, we have bank accounts in the US, we have bank accounts also in the UK, I have a bank account in the Isle of Man as well. So we have bank accounts all over, and they're multiple currencies as well. So that helps mitigate currency risk. When one currency is down, the other might be up. So for example, most of our savings are in US dollars. Right now they're in US treasuries. But you know, most people, they have everything in one currency, everything in one bank, everything in one country. And there's no reason to do it, because account fees are largely gone now. They're a thing of the past. So it's not like you're paying loads of money for maintenance to have bank accounts in another country. It's all convenient now. You can manage it on applications. You can get money from ATMs in Canada. So the public's view of the banking system, they think it is safe. They think it is stable. But the reality is, guys, we know on this channel, it's far from safe and stable. And even other massive global banks know that it's not stable at all. And there are major problems with Canadian banks. It's just that Canadian banks don't want to talk about it. They know they've got insane risk on their balance sheet, but they're never going to come out and admit that. So you can't say that you weren't warned, whether it was me, whether it was other global banks, whether it was other people in the investment space. they laugh at Canada, as Canada is one of the biggest real estate bubbles in the world, one of the biggest debt bubbles in the world. Closely, you've got Australia and New Zealand. Those are other big bubbles. You've also got China, which has a massive real estate bubble, and look at how that's going for them right now. In fact, China was the biggest real estate bubble in the world. So if you think it's too big to fail, you're probably wrong. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, you might like this video here. You might like this playlist here. If you're looking for a VPN, go to expressvpn.com/market mania. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.